Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Cokerhook. This evening, we're going to be speaking with Larry Moore. Larry is the owner of Larry's Auto Works here in Mountain View, California, and we're going to be talking about things that I think as consumers we should know about because of the impact that it actually has on our environmental situation. Larry, I want to thank you for coming and joining me here today. It's been a while since we've seen each other, but I really appreciate your coming back and being on Reference Point again.
I'm looking forward to it. It's always great getting on the show.
Well, good. Well, let's talk about a couple of these things. You had actually mentioned to me several weeks ago, it was kind of something that I hadn't been aware of, and that had to do with how as an owner of a vehicle, if I'm coming in to get my car worked on, I actually have some options that could be more environmentally friendly than I might otherwise think. I mean, I get my oil changed every 3,000 or 4,000 miles or whatever I should anymore, and I've been doing that for years. But you were mentioning to me, and I saw something that you had sent me in an email, that there's actually re-refined oils now that have a much that are as good as the stuff that comes out
or better,
okay, and doesn't cost any more money than the other stuff, and actually has an impact on the environment that is substantially better. So tell me more about that. How did you come onto this, and what can I as a consumer really do?
Well, I've been watching re-refined oil for a lot of years. I know the military's used it. I know a lot of fleets have used it, but I couldn't get it for my customers, couldn't get it for my cars. I'm old enough that I remember back when we used to have reclaimed motor oil. You know, I had this old car that used to burn a lot of oil.
Oh yeah.
And I'd go buy these cheap 5-gallon kegs of oil and
I
carry them with
days,
me,
yeah.
and every few days dump some in. You know. And so when I first heard of re-refined oil, I was like, yeah, I don't want that stuff in my car. But then I started reading about it, and I learned that the military was using it. I learned that a lot of fleets have successfully used it, and that it's actually a better oil than the oil we would normally put in the car.
When you say re-refined versus reclaimed, what are we talking about there? I mean, how significant of a difference is there?
Well, big difference. Reclaimed would literally be oil that you would take out of a car and maybe dump through a filter of some kind to take out any heavy stuff. Mm-hmm. But you'd still have basically oil that had acids in them, had foreign chemicals into it, and which would not be a good thing to put back in your engine, because part of oil's job in an engine is to clean that stuff out. And when you drain the oil should always be drained warm. When you drain the oil, it should all go out with the oil, and then fresh oil goes in.
Okay.
Well, if you drain that all out and you take it and put it in somebody else's engine like that, that's not particularly a good thing.
That doesn't help the car any.
Yeah, you're garbage in my car.
Yeah, there you go.
It doesn't work. So what they do with re-refining is they, of course, do the basic cleaning processes, but then they literally put it back through a refining process. And refining, I think the word is a good descriptor. It refines it. It makes it finer and finer and finer. By finer, they heat it, they crack it. They do things which take and separate out oil with different characteristics into different levels. So if they want an oil that has particular characteristics, they refine it so that what's left after they do all the refining is an oil that meets that criteria. So re-refining is literally taking this oil, and it's already been refined several times, because to become motor oil,
right.
it had to be
reach
refined.
A certain standard to begin with. Right.
Now they're taking it and they're refining it even further. So what they end up with is an oil that has Trade Commission as a semi-synthetic.
Semi-synthetic.
Yeah. Now let me explain that a little bit.
Please.
Synthetic oils, most of the synthetic oils made today or sold today are not truly synthetic oils. They're actually petroleum oils that are highly refined. But there was a lot of oil they weren't able to take out of a barrel because the extra refining made the cost too high and they couldn't sell it.
Oh.
So the oil companies all went to the Federal Trade Commission and said, Federal Trade Commission, we'd like you to allow us to declare these as synthetics, because they're way better than regular oil, which there's no question. It is better oil, but it's not really synthetic. So I don't want to mislead people by saying that this re-refined oil is synthetic.
Right.
It is declared to be a semi-synthetic because it has many of the same characteristics that these so-called synthetics have, which is very good oil. There's nothing wrong with it. But it's still motor oil. It still comes out of the ground, out of crude.
Okay. And So where does it all come from? In your shop, you change oil for people.
Yes.
You take that the oil that comes out of the car and you dump it into a big vat or something like that.
We keep it in big barrels, yeah.
And then what? Somebody comes and...
A company comes around with a big truck, pumps it out. At one time we were having to pay to have it pumped. Now we don't have to pay anymore. They come and take it from us. We'd love to get paid for it, but we haven't figured that one out yet. That gets then taken off to various places. Now, it used to be that a lot of that oil ended up as bunker oil. Bunker oil basically is oil that gets pumped into ships, and they wait till they're more than, I think it's 3 miles or 5 miles offshore, and then they burn it.
They burn it.
They burn it. So it's used to power the ships, which is all well and good, except that that's going into the air.
I see. So they're using
any impurities
it
are going in the air
as the fuel to propel the ship.
Right.
But then the particulates that come out of it and all the other crap is just going in the atmosphere.
Or in the ocean or wherever it goes.
Right.
Yeah. So by doing this oil has a higher use. They'll sell it to be re-refined before they'll use bunker oil. And so therefore more of it gets back in that stream of coming back and being put into cars.
So they have to go through multiple processes to take the oil that they're pulling out of the tanks for all this used stuff and refining it. Doesn't it cost a lot more to make that process happen?
It actually doesn't, because they don't have the cost of pulling it out of the ground. They don't have the cost of shipping it, at least not long distances, especially if they're buying the oil over in Arab countries or where they may be buying it. It's already local. It goes to the refinery. It's already got a lot of the refining done. It doesn't have any of the crude. It doesn't have any of the really heavy oil or the lighter oil in it. It's all within a fairly narrow spectrum.
Okay.
So right away they start with a better product. So they don't have to run it through as many refining processes in order to get a much better grade oil.
So they can actually take their source material and come out with a finished product faster, with less effort, less cost, less energy usage, and all that sort of stuff. Interesting. So where do you get this stuff? I mean, is this the sort of thing that as a consumer, where do people get their oil these days? If they're doing their own thing, they can go to Pep Boys or, Target or someplace. And they go, can you get this kind of a product?
Not as yet.
No.
I believe at some point it'll be available, but the expensive part of buying oil in containers is the containers.
Ah, yeah, sure.
Okay. Although a lot of times that oil is sold much cheaper only because they want to get it out on the market. A lot of times oil is loss leaders for auto parts stores and stuff because it gets people in to buy other stuff.
Sure.
Okay. But right now it's only available in bulk. We buy it in bulk. It's not most shops, to the best of my knowledge, there are no other independent shops out there who have this available to their customers. There is a couple chains that I believe one started in Southern California, I think there's one up here, who have this same oil, Eco Oil.
So where can our audience go to get information about this sort of thing? Because there's a lot of increased consciousness of environmental impact. And what you're telling me here about this process here has impacts at multiple levels. There's an environmental impact because you're not just dumping the stuff in the bay, or you're not trying to burn crappy material that's going to add for pollution. So you're actually having an environmental effect. It has an economic effect because we're not if we are able to we got to use a lot of oil in this country.
Yes.
If we're able to reutilize that material, then that's a lot less that we have to go out and buy on the open market.
Once it's done on a large scale, that's true. Yes.
Sure. So it sounds like this is not yet done on a large scale. But as a consumer, where would I go to get some information about this so that I could make a decision and then maybe go to my auto repair guy and say, "Yo, Fred, I want to start using this stuff in my car."
If you Google Eco Oil, ECO oil.
Eco Oil, yeah.
You watch the links, it'll take you to several different sources for it. The present Eco Oil, there is some other brands, but most of them are East Coast. West Coast, the only one that I know of is the Eco Power oil. And that currently is distributed by a company named Safety Clean. It is available. If a shop wants to buy it and put it in their customers' cars, they only need to call and talk to the people who market it.
So are the people in your business comfortable? Do they You seem to have gone through a process
Yeah.
that brought you to the point of saying, hey, this is actually could be a good thing. So how are the rest of the, or not say the rest, that's kind of
Well,
too much.
in general,
how are the other guys?
Yeah, in general, most of the shops out there are not even aware that it exists. Some who are aware of it have the same reaction I had at first, which is, whoa, I don't want that old oil in my car. I think anybody who investigates it will find that it's a very high quality product, and then it does solve some issues. Even the refining process you were talking about, what has to be going through, it takes 83% less energy to make a quart of EcoPower oil than it does to make regular oil. Yeah. It's not available for all. Like right now, we only can do a fill on about 70% of the cars we see. There are some grades that are not available.
Oh, okay.
So there's so many different grades now out there that the manufacturers require. And we're slowly expanding the oil we carry in the Eco Oil. But even if we expand it all the way, we're probably still only going to have 90% coverage.
What about the manufacturers? Is there any sense from them as to being supportive or being negative about this process, or how?
I don't know. I'm a little surprised that the major oil companies haven't already picked up on it. They certainly could, because they could convert any one of their regular refineries to this. They have to add some cleaning and some processes on the front end to get back to the basic base stock. But they could do it.
I mean, if they could sell the stuff for the same price for a lot less cost, it would seem to me that that's a pretty appropriate business decision.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't claim to know all about the world, the world economics.
We don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I can only tell you that it's a great oil to put in your car.
Okay, but as far as the auto manufacturers themselves go, there isn't anybody
No.
that is saying, "Oh no, you shouldn't do this sort of thing."
No, in fact, Mercedes uses it as the original fill in their cars.
Really?
Yes, right from the factory, the Mercedes comes with this oil in it.
Wow. So the Europeans have been doing this for some time. That must mean.
Yes. The Europeans are much more into the recycled and recycling. The cars that come from Europe have to have a much higher content of recycled material. Oil is one way to handle that.
Yeah, that makes
or
sense.
Recyclable, I should say,
Recyclable
material. Yeah.
And we don't often think of some of those things, and this is kind of tangential, but there are other fluids in the vehicle that are hydrocarbons,
Right.
like the brake fluids
Right.
and the
Power steering fluid.
fluids and the transmission fluids. Is there a similar kind of process potential there that you?
It's a potential. It has to be a big enough market to make it worthwhile, or they
Sure.
won't make the investment in it. I don't see any reason why they couldn't. It's the same. It's all refining. It's all working with the same base hydrocarbons and breaking it down into what you want it to be.
All right. I want to take us to another level of discussion on it, because in addition to the opportunity for a consumer to say, hey, let's use some of this re-refined oil, you were telling me about the changes that have to do with brake systems and brake pads, and some of the ecological impact of what's being currently,
Right.
with current brakes and things like that. So let's talk a little bit about that, because that was very fascinating. I mean, you were saying copper, and I'm thinking copper, yeah, you make pennies out of it, you make electrical wire, it's a good conductor for
Right.
electricity, and what's this got to do with brakes? So let's talk a little bit about
Okay.
that.
Well, as you probably remember, a few years ago, asbestos was taken out of brakes.
Oh.
Asbestos was taken out of everything.
Yeah, it was the big
in
evil.
theory.
Yeah.
Okay. And when asbestos was taken, asbestos actually was a very unique product, or very unique element, in that it worked really well in brakes because it could take a lot of heat.
Right.
And it would hold up. It wouldn't break down from heat. But when they no longer had it, they had to find substitute materials. There's always been another group of brakes that didn't have asbestos, called metallics or semi-metallics. But by and large, those were not suitable for very small cars. They were noisy. They had some other problems with them. But metallic content had to be, asbestos content had to be something had to be found for a substitute.
Sure.
So a couple of the companies came up with the copper as the material that they could put in with other materials and keep it very cost effective and still have it wear. The copper is what allows the brake pads to wear well. Without the copper, the brake pads would wear out very quickly.
Would they like disintegrate or just?
They would just wear out very quickly.
How much copper is in these things? I mean, it's just a very tiny...
That's a trade secret.
Oh.
I say that because Stanford, in the course of doing the studies on this, found that it's proprietary information, that even sometimes the brake manufacturer isn't absolutely sure how much copper there is. They give out a spec that they need done, and the formulators, usually in foreign countries, in fact all of them I think, I don't know for sure, formulate and put together a material that they will then sell that says this will meet your criteria. Copper is what was used as the mix in there in
and
order
why is
to
that
do
a
it.
problem?
The problem with copper is that as it sloughs off of the brake, it leaves a very fine, actually soluble, because copper is soluble in water. So what happens is, as you step on your brakes, that powder goes off onto the ground.
Sure.
It rains, or some other water or whatever washes it down into the storm drains, which of course go straight to the bay.
Right.
There's no processing involved. And that water with the copper in solution in it gets into the small algae and plant life, which is then eaten by larger algae and plant life, which is then eaten by larger microorganisms and larger, finally the fish eat them.
Right.
By the time it gets there, it's high concentration of copper because it doesn't break down. So as each of the small pieces takes a little and gets eaten,
Right.
each of the bigger ones collect more. And if we eat the fish that have the copper, it's very bad for us.
So it's, I mean, you hear a lot of stuff in the news over the last couple of years about lead in seafood. And I don't know, God knows where the lead's coming from, but what you say, and lead is a heavy metal. Copper is, I don't know where it is in the classification.
Not as heavy as lead, but yeah.
But it is, it's no good for you either, is what you're trying to say. So to get that stuff in the body creates problems that.
And it's very soluble. That's the problem. Is it's very fine already when it comes off, and then it actually becomes soluble into the water, so that it very easily is transported everywhere and is taken in by the plant life and the small animals.
Okay.
There's parts of the bay you can't fish because the fish have too much copper.
There was, you referred to Stanford and some study or something like that. Give me a little background on that.
Well, it became evident about 12 years, I think it was about 12 years ago, when there was a lot of discussions going on locally with Palo Alto Water District, and they were trying to find ways to get copper because there was obviously too much copper in the bay, and they were trying to figure out where it was coming from. And myself and some other people suggested that perhaps it was coming from brake pads because I'm no chemist, but I can hold it up and I can see the copper in it. Okay. And I said, well, you ought to look into brake pads because we believe that that is a huge source of copper. And I think there was some disdain over that at first, but a couple of the people, especially a couple of the scientists, the environmental scientists, looked at that and said, you know, you may have something there. And so in order to find out how much copper was in, it turned out we couldn't just go to the brake companies and say, how much copper do you have? Because that's their own special secret.
Right.
So Stanford got involved in their legal educational wing of it, and they went out and did investigation, and they held themselves as a third party to hold on to secret material.
Okay. Right.
And all the brake manufacturers reported to them. There's excellent studies, far more than I can possibly go into, on the website, and I forget the website now. It's the suscon, suscon.org.
suscon.org, okay.
Yeah, and they talk a lot about the studies that were done and what was found. What was determined basically is that approximately 80% of the copper going in the bay every day is coming from brake pads.
Really?
Yeah.
When did they convert from asbestos to copper?
I think it's been about 15 years, but I couldn't swear to it. Yeah.
So
time flies as you get older.
Yes, as you're having fun too. So let's say it was even 10 years. So 10 or 15 years, all the new cars that were being put on the road had to have them.
Especially the small foreign cars.
Okay, and then anybody that was replacing brake pads they had to get this because it was mandated you can't have asbestos in this thing.
Right.
So that's like millions of vehicles running around.
Yeah. And every time you step on the brakes, how many times a day?
Yeah.
It dumps a little bit on the ground.
Wow. Okay. So what do you do about it?
Well, one of the things is that the environmentalists who oversaw this study with Stanford came up with solid proof, which they took to the legislators in California.
Yeah.
And in fact, Governor Schwarzenegger just signed, I think it's 3 weeks ago, signed SB 346, I always forget the number, which basically says that all copper must be phased out. The problem is that it's being done starting in 2021, and it isn't going to be completely phased out until 2032.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot of time in between.
It's a lot of time in between.
Okay.
In fact, there are copper-free materials available right now.
So, okay, so the reason that they had copper in it was because it replaced the asbestos, which gave the stability to the brake pad, allowed it to wear well. So what you're stating here is that there are alternatives already in place that are without copper that are as good, that keep...
Or better.
Really?
You know, the particular pads that we've chosen, there are several companies that make it. So the particular pads we've chosen is because they have an excellent wear characteristics. They wear as good or better than the original. They're quiet. They don't dust. Best of all, they don't cost anymore.
So you could get them for the same price that you could whatever you're buying right now. That
I will admit that if every shop putting brakes on cars went out to buy them today, there aren't enough.
Right. Then you run into a supply and demand issue.
Yeah.
Right.
And part of that is because there has been no demand for these brakes. They've been there, but there's been no one saying, look, I don't want copper in my brakes. So these companies have done the development, but they haven't been widely sold because they aren't a well-known brand name.
As a consumer, could I go into my shop, my repair shop, when I need to get brakes on and say, hey, I want copper-free brakes?
You could, but in most cases, the repair shop owner would have no idea of what you're talking about because they buy what they get from their suppliers. Now, they do buy their brakes based on their favorites, the ones that they believe have less problems or they like to install or whatever. And they're all good reasons. But very few of those decisions are made based on do they have copper in them or not, because it's even though it's been studied for about 12 years, it's not been widely known in the industry.
So what do we do? If I'm a consumer that's watching this show and going, geez, I probably ought to try to do something like that. Other than, of course, coming to your shop, what can I do? How do I get this?
If they were to go to their shop, the person working on their car, and say, I want copper-free pads, at the very least what's going to happen is the shop owner's going to have to start investigating it. Okay, and they're going to have to start finding out that there are alternatives out there. Turns out that semi-metallic brake pads, which have always been considered the better brake pads from a standpoint of they work on heavier loads, they last longer. Most semi-metallic pads have almost no copper in them by nature of how they're made. Even though they're metallic, copper is not one of the metals that they tend to use.
Got it.
So getting a semi-metallic pad is one way to do it. Now, not all semi-metallic pads are created the same. They don't all work on all cars, but there are several different choices out there. I believe that if the consumers begin to demand it, the shops will rise to the occasion and find it.
In order for them to do that, they have to know that it's there.
That's right.
They have to know that there's an
That's
option.
exactly right.
And that's one of the reasons I was so excited to have you come on the show today, because of these two topics that we've talked about, re-refined oil and copper-free brake pads, were things that I had absolutely no clue about. All right. But it presents an opportunity for me as a consumer to take an environmentally conscious step without it hitting my pocketbook.
That's right.
Because I think that's part of the problem that people look at when they're looking at these things that you supposedly can do to make your life better.
The wallet comes before the environment in most cases, just because of the pragmatic reality.
And that's absolutely. So the fact that you can opt for something that's more environmentally friendly and you can do it without increasing your costs, that's a cool thing. So are there any agencies? I mean, I know that you and I first met because of the Green Business Program here in the county, Santa Clara County. Are there any of the organizations like the Green Business Program or anything like that that are involved in either of these two areas in terms of promotion or awareness or anything
Not
like
as
that?
yet, but I believe now there's going to be a lot more information going out about it. I know that on the Palo Alto Public Works, I want to say, and I don't think I'm using the right term, but on Palo Alto Public Works for the sewage treatment plant, they have the same information regarding the brakes and the, not the oil, but on the brakes. They have a very good write-up on it, what it's about, and it's in plain English.
Oh, well, there you go.
Most
That's
important.
useful, yeah, being able to have it in a language that we can understand. We've got just a little bit over a minute left in the show. What I wanted to do before we end off here is go back to letting people know the websites that they can go to. I unfortunately did not have this done to put up on the screen, folks, so I apologize for that. But I'm going to ask Larry to give these websites again. So get your pens out and write this down. Go do the research so that you can become more aware and therefore take some initiative in this direction. So let's talk about the Eco Oil first.
Okay.
What's the website that people can go to get a little bit of information on that?
Oh, let's see. Do I even have that exact website? But if you go and you Google Eco Power Oil, ECO Power Oil,
okay,
it will come up.
Okay.
Okay, I know that because we've sent some people there to do that. I do not have, I apologize, I don't have that one either.
That's fine. But on the other one, it is...
It's www.suson.org/BPP. BPP being the Brake Pad Partnership.
Brake Pad Partnership. Okay, folks, I hope you wrote that down and that you actually take the initiative to speak to your auto repair person about these opportunities, because it's your chance to do something without hitting your pocketbook to have an environmentally friendly impact. Larry, this has been great. You've enlightened me a lot, and I hope the viewers have seen it. And we really appreciate your coming on the show again, and thank you for that. So, and you out there in the viewing audience, we'll see you next time on Reference Point. Thanks.